I'm Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life, and we are delighted to be able to bring you this press conference here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on what is truly a historic week. Tomorrow, as we know, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear the oral arguments in the case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization coming out of Mississippi. And while the day of the oral arguments is, of course, critical in any Supreme Court case, this is not the only significant moment in this unfolding story. It was significant back in May when the Supreme Court decided to take this case, and it will be significant in the weeks and months following this week, depending how long the court takes to issue its decision. And we simply do not know how long that will be or how short that will be. The significance of this whole period of time is that the pro-life movement could be, and America could be, at this moment, only months away from seeing the reversal of Roe versus Wade, a goal that our movement has had from the beginning. A goal which is part of the overall goal of restoring full protection to the youngest children. It's simple as that. Reversing Roe v. Wade is a necessary, critical, and monumental step towards that ultimate goal, but it's not exactly the same thing as the goal itself. The goal itself is that the children in the womb, in the first 9 months of existence, would have the same legal protections that the rest of us have. Their dignity demands it. Their rights require it. The very purpose of government necessitates it. That government is, as our founders said in the Declaration, there to secure these rights that are given by the Creator. Are we indeed at a moment when the court is about to reverse Roe versus Wade? Let's just review some of the things that are being said to the court at this point in time so that we can draw our conclusions about whether that's the case. So the state of Mississippi, as other states have done over recent years, passed a law protecting babies in the womb prior to the point of viability. The point of viability is that point which both Roe versus Wade and subsequently Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992 identified as the boundary line before which a state could not prohibit abortion or protect the unborn, as we prefer to say. After which they could if they wanted to, but indeed did not have to. Why did the court use viability as that dividing line? Well, first of all, certainly not because of the Constitution. It's nowhere in the Constitution, as abortion itself is nowhere in the Constitution. Nor did it derive it from the history and legal traditions of our nation. There is nothing deeply rooted in the history of our nation that speaks about any kind of right to abortion, or that certainly talks about viability as a significant dividing line. If you look carefully at the history of Roe versus Wade, you actually find out that about a month before that decision was issued in 1973, January 22nd, about a month prior to that, without the topic of viability having come up either in the laws that the court was reviewing from Texas and Georgia, or in the not one but two sets of oral arguments that occurred in 1971 and in 1972. And by the way, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the first set of oral arguments. A week from Monday, as a matter of fact, December 13th, was the first round of oral arguments in Roe v. Wade 50 years ago. That's very significant that these oral arguments tomorrow are taking place almost on the 50th anniversary of those of Roe v. Wade. But in any case, in those oral arguments, the topic of viability never came up, nor did it come up in any of the briefs that were submitted to the Supreme Court. It came out of nowhere. The justices put it in a memo as they were circulating among themselves, various memos and having various conversations. There had been a decision that made a passing reference to viability and whatnot, but there's nothing substantial here, constitutionally speaking, to using the point of viability as a dividing line as to whether somebody's going to be protected by law or not. In short, it's arbitrary and it's absurd. Constitutionally, it's absurd, baseless. Medically, it is also unworkable as a dividing line. First of all, why in the context of abortion, which aims to kill the child, does the child's ability to survive make any difference at all? It's completely irrelevant to what it is that you're about to do. If you're going to kill the child, there's no point to asking whether that child is able to survive. Viability is a concept that combines the characteristics of the child, the health condition of the mother, and the medical technology and commitment available on the part of the medical team who is involved in that particular birth of that particular child, all together resulting in a prediction rather than a specific point in time. Viability is a prediction. When you combine all those factors, it's not just about the timing of how long has the child been gestating in the womb. That's one element. What is the condition of the child? What is the condition of the mother medically? And what is the condition of the medical technology? And not only the condition of the technology and the availability of those methods that could help the child survive, but very importantly, just as importantly, what is the level of commitment on the part of those doctors, nurses, and others on the medical team to making that child survive? If you have two facilities in the same city, viability will mean a different thing in both of those facilities. If one of them has the philosophy of saying, we're going to do everything we can to help that child survive, and the other has the philosophy of saying, any child that comes out of the womb prior to, let's say 23 weeks, we're not going to do anything. Well, obviously, viability means different things in those two institutions in the very same city at the very same time. For the court to continue to say to the states that they can't protect these babies prior to viability, for the court to say that viability has any meaning as a boundary line for whether we're going to protect life, is completely outdated and absurd. That is one of the many things this week, and tomorrow in particular, that is being said to the Supreme Court, not only by Mississippi, which passed and enacted this Gestational Age Act in 2018 and will be defending it in court tomorrow, but also by the many briefs that have been submitted in support of Mississippi in this case. I have had the pleasure, by the way, and let me just add this as a point of information, of speaking with the legislators in Mississippi who were responsible for this law, both in the House and in the Senate. Representative Becky Curry was the author of the bill in the House. And in the Senate, Senator Joey Fillingane, together with Senator Angela Hall, who was a primary spokesperson for the bill, shepherded it through the process. And then, of course, former Governor Phil Bryant signed it into law in 2018. They are going to be honored, by the way. These three legislators I just mentioned will be honored here in Washington, D.C. on the day of the March for Life. We're going to have a prayer service that morning in Constitution Hall. And each year at that prayer service, we present a National Pro-Life Award, recognition award. We want to give the whole pro-life movement a chance to thank these legislators for what they've done in enacting a law that indeed is now not only getting the attention of the Supreme Court, but could be a vehicle for the reversal or the severe weakening of Roe versus Wade as we continue to move forward. What is Mississippi saying to the court, besides the fact that viability has no meaning as a dividing line? And that's the least, that's the minimum that Mississippi is asking the court to do. You know, even if they don't go so far as to reverse Roe v. Wade, to say at least that viability is not a barrier for the states to protect babies in the womb is the very least that the state is asking the court to do. But the state is asking also the court to do a lot more, because it's saying that what should happen here is that the court should reverse its precedents of Roe and of Casey altogether, and make the standard of review for abortion-related laws the same standard that just about every other law has to face if it is challenged in court. And that's called a rational basis standard of review. In other words, a state is pursuing a legitimate interest that it has, and it's doing so in a reasonable way. The law it passes is reasonably related to the legitimate interest that it's trying to pursue. You want to protect babies in the womb. You want to protect the health of mothers. You want to protect the integrity of the medical profession. And those are the three state interests in particular that are at issue in this case. There are other interests too. But for example, Justice Thomas has identified as a compelling state interest not to allow the abortion industry to advance a eugenics philosophy. A practice of eugenics the abortion industry is deeply rooted in that, as we know, especially through Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood. We have other interests, as we come to know, for example, the baby's ability to feel pain. The state has an interest in protecting babies from pain, and various laws have been enacted based on the advancement of those interests. The states have many interests. But because of Roe and Casey, which both affirm that the states have these interests, Casey going so far as to say they have these interests from the outset of pregnancy. Nevertheless, while on the one hand, the courts say you have these interests, on the other hand, they tie their hands and say you can't pursue those interests to the point of prohibiting abortion. This makes no sense. And it makes no sense especially because of the fact that both developments in the law, developments in science, and developments in culture have advanced so far that the states are taking notice of all this evidence, the states are taking account of all these changes, and are saying, based on these changed circumstances, we're not in 1973 anymore, we are going to pass these laws that advance our interests. And for the courts to continue to say you can't do that is the equivalent of putting on blindfolds and plugs in your ears and burying your head in the sand and paying no attention to what's going on in the world of medicine, science, and law and culture. The briefs submitted in this case, starting with the state of Mississippi and going on to the 80 or so other briefs that have been submitted, including by some of the people here, including by us at Priests for Life, delve into these changes in quite a bit of detail. Let me just highlight a few of them, because this is one of the several reasons the state of Mississippi is formally presenting to the court as to why they need to reverse these obsolete precedents of Roe and Casey. In the area of medicine, we know more about the unborn child now. We've learned more about the unborn child from 1973 to the present than we have learned in all of human history. It has been an amazing period of growth in the understanding of the child in the womb, ironically coinciding with that period where they have the least protection under the law. The ability simply to visualize the child was nowhere near in 1973, although technically ultrasound existed. It was not commonly used or publicly available to the extent, anywhere near the extent that it is now, nor the quality of the imagery, not only by ultrasound, but by other methods of visualization. cameras going right into the, right up against the amniotic sac and showing the baby in full and living color is nowhere ever was near where it is today. That visualization of the child has then led, if you can see the baby, you can diagnose the baby. You can notice there's a problem. You can go in there surgically and help the baby overcome the problem. And so whether it's neural tube defects or obstructions of the urinary tract or the bladder or even heart problems, this and more has been able to be treated on what medical textbooks have called medical science's newest patient, the baby in the womb. All of this and more, scientifically, the awareness of the baby's ability to feel pain. Some of the briefs bring up medical research just as recent as just a matter of months ago, giving us new information of the baby's awareness. The baby, for example, if you have twins, the way the baby will touch herself versus the way the baby will touch her twin is different. And so, I mean, we're learning and seeing things that we had no idea about in 1973. However, if you look at what we did know in 1973, another thing becomes very clear. To its shame, and to the very thing that the court says it wants to avoid, that is the staining of the reputation of the court, that court, in a decision that even those who agree with the outcome, i.e. legal abortion, just dismiss as entirely lacking in any kind of persuasive reasoning, ignored hundreds of years of scientific and medical research. Justice Blackmun, in writing that decision, ignored, as if it didn't exist, medical progress telling us conclusively how and when a human life begins. And he went back and talked about people like Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas as if he was having a tea party in the Middle Ages or in the Dark Ages. What this man was thinking and what he was trying to accomplish is it really got to be a topic someday for a group of psychologists and psychiatrists to analyze. Because what he did in absolutely just literally skipping over hundreds of years of research is absolutely beneath the dignity of the legal profession, beneath the dignity of the court, and offensive to human reason, to every standard of human reason. This decision is an abomination, not just morally. Medically, it is totally a mess as far as trying to make any kind of assertion of what we do or do not know about the child in the womb. Legally and constitutionally, it's a mess, as we've already pointed out. There's absolutely no mooring in the Constitution. And some will say, oh, but yes, we know the Constitution doesn't mention abortion, but it's a right that's derived from the Constitution. If you're going to start naming rights that are derived from the Constitution as a fundamental principle, the court has identified that you need to follow. It has got to be at least rooted, deeply rooted, objectively rooted in the history and traditions of this country. And when you look at what is objectively rooted in the history and traditions of this country, you see that the historical analysis in Roe versus Wade, again, is a complete embarrassment. It has absolutely nothing to do with reality. And if anything, what you find rooted in the history and legal practices of our country is the protection of the unborn that we inherited from common law, and that was reaffirmed not only by state legislatures, but also by court decisions throughout our history. And as medical knowledge of the unborn advanced in the 19th century, the laws followed and restored protection to these children to the point that when the 14th Amendment was adopted, which, again, Roe v. Wade and supporters of legal abortion today, and no doubt the other side, and now in this case, are going to continue to appeal to as somehow providing some kind of right to abortion. At the time that the 14th Amendment was adopted, the large majority of the states 30 out of 37 at that time, protected the unborn. So to say that somehow this amendment reflects a right to kill those very same children, again, is so absurd that it doesn't deserve the slightest bit of respect, no matter what a person's position on abortion might be. Changes in science, changes in law, as our colleague Alan Parker, who will be speaking here in a moment, points out all the time, every one of the 50 states has now the safe haven laws by which a child that their mom feels she cannot raise can be left to the care of the state and then given to the care of a family, takes away the argument in Roe versus Wade that somehow we need abortion, takes away the argument in Planned Parenthood versus Casey that there's a reliance on abortion, and therefore we have to keep it available for someone who feels they cannot raise that child. This is no longer the case, if it ever was. As Roe v. Wade says, oh, we don't want to impose a distressful life on this mother who is pregnant. Not only with the safe haven laws, but with the development of anti-discrimination laws for pregnant women, the development of all kinds of options. We didn't have the internet back then. Online opportunities for education, for working from home, various laws that give provision for medical leave and child support and care. I mean, the list goes on, and it's articulated in the briefs in this case, has changed the legal landscape when it comes to what can a pregnant mother do. The stigma associated with being an unwed mother has dramatically gone down since Roe versus Wade. All of these changes, the number of pregnancy centers, you could count, especially those that were medical clinics. You could count on one hand when these precedents were issued. Now the pregnancy centers outnumber the abortion clinics by over 3 to 1. We have changed. The country has changed since Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Changed in such dramatic ways that the rationale they gave for legalizing abortion is simply no longer there. These precedents need to be reversed, furthermore, because they have caused tremendous damage and they have proven unworkable. Those who have a background in law will understand the significance of the term unworkable. And let me try to put it in layman's terms, because I'm not an attorney myself. So I, as a layman, can appreciate trying to express this in a way that is as simple as possible. A court is supposed to guide. The Supreme Court is supposed to guide the lower courts. And the courts in turn guide the lawmakers as to what the boundaries of constitutionality are. If I'm going to invest time and money and effort and my reputation in crafting and passing a law that later on is only going to be struck down by the courts, I better think twice when I'm crafting that law to try to stay within constitutional boundaries. Bottom line, the guidance is confusing and self-contradictory. The guidance that the court has given just for the legalization of abortion itself, the rationale behind Roe versus Wade, is a conclusion in search of a rationale. Because if you look at what the court has done, the court has ruled on abortion dozens of times since Roe v. Wade. And it has been like shifting sands. Oh, well, maybe here's the reason why we have to legalize abortion. No, maybe it's this reason. No, it's that reason. And then you have justices on the court at the same time disagreeing on what the foundation for the conclusion actually is. It's been fractured. Planned Parenthood versus Casey was a fractured decision. Different judges saying different things about the same thing and for different reasons. It's been a chaos of confusion. Furthermore, not only has the basis been shifting sands all the time, but what we have seen in what we call this unworkability is Planned Parenthood versus Casey changing the standard of review. Again, those of you trained in law, standard of review How many hoops does a state have to jump through to justify its law? How high is the bar that the court is going to insist on you pass before they say that your law is constitutional? That's standard of review, and there's various different standards of review. So when Roe v. Wade was first issued, they had the highest one. This is a fundamental right. You have a standard of review which is called strict scrutiny. The state cannot limit that right unless it is the least restrictive way of advancing a compelling state interest. I mean, this is the kind of review you're supposed to use for freedom of speech, freedom of religion. You've got fundamental rights, so the state can't interfere with those rights unless there's these very, very, very limited conditions. When Planned Parenthood versus Casey came along, one of the ways they modified Roe v. Wade is that they lowered the standard of review. And they introduced something called an undue burden. And they said, yeah, the state can regulate abortion, before viability. They can't prohibit it, but they can regulate it, as long as it doesn't provide an undue burden to a woman seeking an abortion. Well, brothers and sisters, stop for a minute and think about that. That's not a standard. That's a conclusion. If something is a burden, you come to that conclusion after you analyze. If it's undue, well, that's a judgment. That's a conclusion. It's not a standard. It's not a measuring rod, an undue burden. Again, let me put it in as simple terms as possible. What does it mean? Answer, we don't know. What does it mean to the justices? Answer, they don't know. What does undue burden mean to the lawmakers? Answer, they don't know. There is no way to know, because you have to weigh and balance things that different people come to different conclusions about, even looking at the same set of facts. We don't know what it means, because in those words themselves is a conclusion, not a standard. It's undue. Well, who says it's undue? Maybe the burden is legitimate. Maybe it's a sacrifice that should be made because of the seriousness of the action that you're undertaking. Well, people are going to differ about that. We don't know what it means. And because we don't know what it means, both on the Supreme Court itself and in our lower federal courts, you have had year after year, now decade after decade, conflicting results, contradictory opinions, and a sea of confusion. So that today, if a state passes a law regulating abortion, neither those lawmakers nor the federal judge to which the pro-abortion groups go as soon as that law is about to be enacted have any idea whether the Supreme Court is going to call it an undue burden or not. That is unworkability. It's a standard that doesn't work, and it's not just because we think it doesn't work, it's because the record proves it. So we have had a long track record here of just confusion, and the state of Mississippi now and the amici in this case are saying to the court, let's end the confusion. And let's stop giving abortion a constitutional status that no other medical procedure has. Why is it that just abortion has this constitutional status? The states pass laws all the time in regard to any other kinds of procedures or practices in our society. And again, they are subject normally to the lowest level of review. I talked about these different standards of review, what kind of hoops does the state have to jump through. The lowest, the most reasonable, is the rational basis standard of review. Is the state pursuing a legitimate interest? And is the law, as I mentioned before, reasonably related to that? That's all you need. And what Mississippi is saying is apply that standard of review. Get rid of Roe and Casey. Stop the confusion. Stop giving abortion this heightened constitutional status. And let's get back to a situation, and here's the final point that I'll make here, brothers and sisters. Let's get back to a situation where the ability of the law-making bodies in our states and in the Congress for that matter, to collect evidence, to have hearings, to debate, to be subject to the persuasive power of not only the various lawmakers that are involved in the process, who are duly elected by the people and accountable to the people, but the persuasive power of the people themselves to lobby their legislators, to come to various conclusions, to take part in hearings, to give the benefit of their expertise, the input of the experience of the people, and furthermore, to have an amendment process, an ability for compromise, the give and take that are part of our democratic lawmaking process, the ability not only to have amendments and to have compromises, but then to go back and change the law at a later time, again, through the will of the people expressed through their elected representatives in a process that has already been well defined by our Constitution. Why can't we resolve the abortion problem in that context instead of continue to be subject to a policy imposed on us by unelected judges who are saying that somehow the Constitution requires this when the Constitution says nothing about it? That's what's being argued right now in front of the Supreme Court. That's what's going to be taken up tomorrow. That's what we are all saying. Return this to the will of the people. Not that we think the right to life depends on the will of the people. It actually doesn't. But the fact is that when you are crafting public policy, it's the process we already have in this country by which the will of the people has the ultimate weight that will get us to the desired conclusion, which is exactly what I started with, that these children in the first 9 months of their existence should have the same protection as the rest of us. That's the only conclusion that human reason comes to. But human reason has to come to it through the process that's already been laid out for us by our Constitution and the system of government that we have. So, brothers and sisters, when the court is dealing with a question of what the Constitution means, they've got to get it right. Because if they get it wrong, and they say, as the court has been saying for almost 50 years, the Constitution requires the right to have an abortion. If they get it wrong, you only have two alternatives after that to get it right again. Either you go through the deliberately, extremely difficult process of amending the Constitution. That is a steep hill to climb, and it's the right thing that our founders made it a steep hill to climb. We're the only country in the world still operating under its original Constitution. No other country can say that. Either you have to amend the Constitution to correct the error that here's what the Constitution means, or the court has to change its mind. We're advocating today and tomorrow that the court indeed change its mind and correct its error. When you talk about the power and the force of precedent, it's at its weakest point when it deals with matters of here's what the Constitution means, here's what the Constitution requires. That's when it's at its weakest point. Because if, in fact, a wrong decision was made, as we maintain it was, in decisions like Roe and Casey, well then, no matter how long those errors have been enforced, no matter how long the court has reiterated the same tune, the mistake must be corrected if we're going to have a working Constitution at all. The mistake has to be corrected by the court reversing the erroneous precedent. And the fact that these precedents are egregiously wrong is yet another one of the key reasons that Mississippi and all the rest of us are urging the court today to reverse those decisions. Brothers and sisters, that in a nutshell is what our movement is gathering in this city during these days to say. But as I said before, it's not just about what's happening today and tomorrow, it's what's going to happen over the coming weeks and months. We have to continue educating ourselves in all these arguments. We have to continue praying for the right outcome in this case. We have to continue strengthening our movement so that the work of protecting the unborn will continue. Nobody expects that this court decision is going to make abortion automatically illegal across the country. This is not how it works. It works the way I just explained, that we have to have the people continue to wrestle with this and to bring about the right outcome through the process that we have in place. That is going to happen with because we have a movement. It's not like, some people say, well, we have to return the issue to the states. The issue is already in the states. It's because of the fact that it's in the states that we have this case in the first place. Mississippi passed a law. So you have all kinds of states that they're chomping at the bit. They can't wait to protect the unborn. But they have this roadblock in front of them. You remove that roadblock. It's not just as if, the court says, here, states, I'm going to give this issue back to you to figure out. And then it's as if you were starting with a blank slate and, all the work begins. Sometimes you hear this phraseology. No, that's not accurate. The work has begun a long time ago. The work is being done. A lot of the work has been done. It's like a dam ready to break. You remove that obstacle, and you're going to see right away the fruit of decades of work in the states to protect these children. The fruit will blossom immediately. There will be states, obviously, who have been going and will continue to go in the opposite direction of making abortion more and more available, but we will battle on the state level those kinds of erroneous policies. We'll continue to battle them. And there are states that you're not sure which way they would go. Well, we will do that work. But the fact of the matter is, this country is more pro-life than ever before, and these states are ready to do the work that they are already empowered to do, except for the erroneous roadblock the court has put in their path to do it. And what we are saying this week is very simple. Tear down that wall. Get that roadblock out of the way, and let us do the work that we want to do to protect our own children. So I want to invite now, let me just mention, SupremeCourtVictory.com is a resource that can be used both to gain information about these arguments and also the prayer campaign. There are multiple prayer campaigns going on. I'm sure Alan will mention this as well. But the simple prayer that we have there that people can say for a good outcome in this case, and we invite all who are listening to take part in these prayer campaigns so that we can come to a successful conclusion to this case. So I want to invite Melissa Oden now. She has a unique, not solitary, but nevertheless unique story about how she came to birth. She will share that. And the network of abortion survivors that she has called together. This is one of the examples, brothers and sisters, of how these precedents of Roe and Casey have inflicted so much damage. And that's one of the arguments. They're inflicting damage, so get rid of them. Because damage done not only to babies who have been killed, but the babies who have been aborted, but nevertheless have survived. This important perspective is brought to us in the flesh in people like Melissa. We thank you for your voice, and we thank you for your presence here today. Come and share with us.
As you can imagine, there's a lot I could say as the Supreme Court takes up these arguments this week, but I'll start with, I think, a piece that we all know to be true. No sound evidence shows that women's advancement depends upon abortion. As a survivor of an abortion procedure that was meant to end my life, I couldn't agree more with this statement that was made by Attorney General Lynn Fitch. Being forced to undergo a saline infusion abortion was not empowering to my 19-year-old biological mother. It was traumatizing. Being soaked in the toxic salt solution of that saline infusion abortion over a 5-day period, which was meant to poison and scald me to death, was not empowering for me either. It nearly ended my life. It should have ended my life. It left me with initial health complications that threatened my life. Everything from severe respiratory problems, jaundice, to seizures. Contrary to what we hear in our culture that has been so heavily destroyed and influenced by Roe versus Wade, children do survive abortion procedures, and at a much greater frequency than the abortion industry and their lobby want the general public to know about. Based on CDC data, there are likely in upwards of 20,000 abortion survivors here in the United States. People just like you who had their constitutional rights denied. When I was ultimately rushed off to a NICU that fateful day in August of 1977 by a nurse unwilling to just leave me to die, I weighed 2 pounds, 14 ounces. Medical professionals quickly surmised that my birth mother was not 18 to 20 weeks pregnant, as indicated on my medical records that detail the abortion that I survived. In fact, I was likely more like 31 weeks. Picture that. I was a vulnerable infant who had fought for my life in the womb, and yet there I was, still fighting for my life to be kept alive after I was accidentally born alive. Mississippi and Attorney General Fitch are right with this bill. We know this, and I'm living proof of that. So are the hundreds of abortion survivors that have reached out to us through the Abortion Survivors Network so far. We know that there are thousands more survivors out there, tens of thousands. And I want survivors to know that we're here to support them in their journey of healing and empowerment and finding and using their voices. Abortion doesn't empower or advance women. Life is what empowers. Without first the right to life, there are no other rights. As I've asked Congress in many different ways, how can access to the very act that was meant to end my life, abortion, now simultaneously be my fundamental right to exercise? How can our culture, how can our court reconcile this concept of my rights as a woman who survived a failed abortion? We reconcile it by recognizing that in women's advancement, as evidenced by my birth mother's experience and mine, as well as the hundreds of other survivors and their mothers that I know, we know it's not dependent upon abortion. We also reconcile it by recognizing that, as my friend Sarah Foster of Feminists for Life states, abortion is a reflection we have not met the needs of women. We reconcile it also by acknowledging the humanity of both the woman and the child. My birth mother and I were not enemies. We were both victims. We reconcile it by providing resources and support to women just like my biological mother. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court begins the long overdue process of reconciling this nearly 49-year wrong. As an American whose constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were taken from me, I stand here today with every hope that they'll make it right. Thank you so much for all you do, Father Frank, and all of you here as ministry leaders.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Melissa. It's always good to have your voice and your collaboration in this great movement. And thanks for your leadership of that network of survivors. So the Justice Foundation is headed by Alan Parker, and there are so many national efforts that he and I have been able to collaborate on, including later today the unrolling of, will it be both scrolls, Alan, containing, well, some 500,000 of our fellow citizens have signed on to what is called the moral outcry. Alan has been leading in so many ways with his legal expertise, the eventual overturn of Roe v. Wade and its progeny. Alan has, over the years, represented Norma McCorvey and Sandra Cano, the original petitioners in Roe and Doe, and who became pro-life. He has helped women who have had abortions to let their voices be heard, and that will occur here today at this press conference. So I want to invite my colleague and friend Alan Parker to speak next. Alan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Father Bavone. Thank you for all you do and have done for so many years in the movement. This is the beginning of the culminating moment for those who have been fighting to end abortion for many, many years. I had the great honor to serve as the lawyer for many clients who have filed briefs in this case. And one of those groups of women are 2,249 women who've had abortions, who actually experienced it. Some of them because they thought it was the answer for their problem, others because they were forced to have abortions. Because one of the ways that abortion damages women in America is once you make abortion legal, then it allows other people to unduly pressure, coerce, or force women to having an abortion to solve their problem, not the woman's problem. The woman can be very happy, I'm pregnant. She tells the man, oh no, you're not gonna have a baby. I don't want a baby. Get this abortion now, or we're gonna do something to you. And so that's number one common, a man forcing a woman to have his abortion. Even feminist literature acknowledges that domestic abuse against pregnant women is very strong. Then the second is adult parents forcing a minor daughter to have an abortion against her will. And the third is human trafficking or prostitution. And the pimp or the trafficker wants her in business. So it's not always the woman's choice. But the other thing we have found about even the woman's choice is there was, for many of them, no better alternative. Why should Roe be reversed today? There's three most important reasons that I want to talk about. Number one, even the Supreme Court has finally admitted in Gonzalez v. Carhart that abortion kills an infant life. There's no dispute about that. Number one, what did the court say in Gonzalez v. Carhart? Some women come to regret aborting the infant life they once created and sustained. Just think about that for a moment. It's not a fetus, it's not an embryo, it's not an unborn child, it's not a preborn child. These are words we use, but the court has said it's an infant life. And we all want to protect infant life. I don't think any woman in America wants to kill an infant, even when they get that. I mean, if someone does, they have severe emotional problems. And I think we'd all recognize that. Even people who say, I'm for abortion, they want to help women. Well, the second thing we now know from women themselves and scientific literature and from the court's own admission, right after they said some women come to regret aborting the infant life, they said severe depression and loss of esteem can follow. In a minute, one of the 2,249 women I represent, Cecilia Sullivan, is going to tell you what that depression and other things are. As early as 1992, in the Planned Parenthood v. Casey case itself, when the Supreme Court first reduced Roe from a fundamental right with no limits to a mid-level right, the court started thinking, well, maybe it's wrong, but the court admitted and allowed informed consent statutes so that some women would not suffer devastating psychological consequences. Okay, the court has admitted that. So we know we're killing an infant life. We know we're having women who have devastating psychological consequences. Why would we want to do that to any woman in America? Well, because most people don't know these things, but I just said, but now the courts admit them. But also people think, well, a woman's in a difficult situation. I want to help the woman. And we all want to help women in difficult situations. I represent thousands of women who chose abortion. Some were forced doing it. There are situations, we don't come in condemnation, but what today exists in every state is a legal tool called the Safe Haven Law. All 50 states have one, and if abortion were banned today in any state or every state, no woman would have to parent a child that she does not want to parent or can't parent because of her life circumstances. So we can have compassion for women without killing the child and having survivors even of abortion who demonstrate that it's life that we were attempting to kill. We can have, without killing the child, without injuring the women, we can say you can have the freedom of Roe v. Wade without these disastrous consequences. What is safe haven law? Under that law, you simply deliver the child safely to a hospital or fire station or other designated safe spot by that state within the time allotted for that state. It usually is like a hospital or fire station or an EMS facility, 3, 30, 60 days, 90 in some states. So that's all it is. It's there in every state. And you know the advantages of abortion, over abortion? Think about these things. One, it doesn't kill a human being, which is a crime against humanity when the government withdraws legal protection from a class of humans. 2, it doesn't hurt women. But 3, it's free to the woman, unlike abortion. She doesn't have to pay $600 to $1,000, $2,000 for an abortion. But the abortion industry doesn't tell women that. They say, give us your money, we'll take care of your problem. I remember one of the women in Operation Outcry saying, they told her 10 minutes, you'll never have to think about it again. And she said, there's not a day go by I don't think of my child, where he would have been, and the grief and sorrow that I had from taking the life of my own child. So it's free, no legal procedure, no medical procedure. You just drop the baby out. Abortion has risks, as even the abortion industry sometimes says, though they try to minimize it. Some women die from abortions in America. I know those women and their mothers. But, you know, you won't die if you drop your child off at a hospital or fire station. So no women have to die. That's a good thing. And it's equally available to the rich and the poor. In the Dobbs case, they're trying to make an argument that, oh, well, there's only one abortion facility in Mississippi. Why is that? Because most doctors don't want to kill infant lives. They know what it is. It's a dirty secret, but they don't want to do the dirty deed of killing a baby, even a woman in difficult circumstances. Now they can say, why don't you safe haven the baby? You won't have to take care of it. Whatever your problem is, society will help you take care of that child. That's a humane and just society. That's where we are today. Those laws didn't start till 1999, 7 years after Casey. The last time the Supreme Court really considered whether to reverse Roe was 1992 in the Casey decision. And they weakened Roe, but they didn't go all the way because there was no safety net for the woman. And now there's a government, socially approved safety net in every citizen, every state. And if you don't have an abortion, there's absolutely no risk of having an abortion-related trauma in your life. And there are millions of women who suffer the trauma of abortion. So those are the 3 big reasons. Why would we want to kill children, inflict devastating psychological consequences on women, when there's a better alternative? Simply say, give us your child as a society. It's a more just and humane society with that in effect. Father Pavone talked about viability. I want to briefly mention one of our other clients. We represented in this Dobbs case the first formerly frozen human embryo to file a brief in the Supreme Court of the United States. All of us listening to this broadcast were former embryos. We all started out that way, but most of us weren't frozen. But through in vitro fertilization, which didn't exist until 1978, 5 years after Roe v. Wade, Hannah was conceived in a Petri dish at fertilization, and then she was frozen a few days later. And she was preserved for over 2 years outside her mother's womb, viable, living. And then she was given to an adoptive mother who actually became her birth mother. Whereas that doesn't happen in the normal IVF situation or a normal adoption where another woman gives birth and then places her child for adoption and an adoptive mother takes it. But so what does that prove? It proves today what was undeniable. And even Roe, I believe, for example, John Roberts, the Chief Justice, or someone writing the opinion might say, the court did the best job it could in 1973, but instead, in 73, at this state in the development of man's knowledge, we do not, the judiciary cannot speculate as to when life begins. Hannah is living proof life begins at fertilization, okay? And that's in the case. The other thing that Roe said in 1973 was it said, even in 1973, it said, before viability, you cannot ban abortion. But after viability, the point at which the child can live outside the mother's womb, albeit with artificial aid, the states can ban abortion. So viability, Hannah lived outside her mother's womb, albeit with artificial age. She was frozen, had to be that to be kept alive until there was a woman ready to adopt her. So the court could say, we're not really overruling Roe. Science has overtaken Roe. We said at the very time, when a child could be preserved outside the womb, albeit with artificial aid, states are free to ban abortion. There you go. And so today, because of science, the court could say that the case has been basically eliminated or fulfilled by advancement in human knowledge and science. So we're very hopeful that all those things could be. We're going to be at the Lincoln Memorial today from 2 to 3 o'clock, and there'll be a live broadcast of it on a website called nationaldayofrepentance.org. We're doing 40 hours of broadcasting on nationaldayofrepentance.org, beginning at 1 o'clock, then at the Lincoln from 2 to 3. Then we're going to march to the Martin Luther King Memorial from there, from 3:30 to 4:30, we'll be there. So why are we going to those two places? Both of those giants of American history fought against Supreme Court decisions that purported to settle a social issue for all time, and yet in effect were great injustices and crimes against humanity. We think of Lincoln as fighting slavery, but he really was fighting against the Dred Scott decision of the United States Supreme Court just before the Civil War, which didn't still the waters, it provoked the Civil War. And I believe stopping abortion may be the only way to end a civil war in America. And we're going to be praying that we don't have to have a civil war in America. But we can, just like anti-slavery could not give up, even though it was the settled law of the land, even though the Supreme Court said it's in the Constitution, we cannot give up defending children in the womb. Just like Melissa, just like Hannah, just like all of us. We were once all in that womb. We're all human beings. When does human life begin? Mary Strage, who was Mary Browning, who was the lead attorney on Hannah's brief, put in the brief, when does life begin? It begins at the beginning. Ask yourself, when does human life begin? When the sperm and the egg come together and the cells start dividing. That's the same human being that may end up living in a nursing home at the end of the life, needing help also. We all need help at certain times in our life. So both of them fought against Supreme Court decisions. We think of Martin Luther King fighting against slavery, but he fought against the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which in 1896 said, this Constitution says that African Americans shall have equal rights, but no, we, the court, say separate but equal is equal. And segregation under the Supreme Court's acceptance as the law of the land, quote, quote, held it in place for 58 years. It wasn't until 1954 in Brown v. Board of Education that the Supreme Court reversed it and said, you know what? Let's go back to the Constitution, which says equal rights for all. What does it say over the court? Equal justice for all. But the children in the womb are not getting that. And we need to stop it just like we stopped slavery, just like we stopped segregation. And the court did the right thing in Brown by reversing its own 58-year-old precedent. Last year, when Justice Kavanaugh joined the majority, reversing a 1972 precedent concerning unanimous jury verdicts, he said Brown v. Board of Education was the most important and greatest decision in the Supreme Court history. The Supreme Court did not create new rights for African Americans. No, they just went back to the Constitution. There is no right to abortion in the Constitution. The word is not even in the Constitution, but you know what words are in the Constitution twice? The right to life. In the 5th and the 14th Amendment, no person shall be deprived of life without due process of law, meaning you have to do something terribly wrong and be convicted of it before the state can take your life. But the Supreme Court said, we're going to take them all in the womb. So I want to introduce at this time Cecilia Sullivan. She is one of the courageous, amazing women of Operation Outcry. Operation Outcry tells the world the truth that abortion hurts. It does also help get women in touch with abortion recovery resources. But she's going to tell you what abortion does to women who got abortions. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Alan. I was 17 years old when I became pregnant, and because of fear of telling my parents, I waited 5 months until I was finally able to tell them. They immediately arranged for me to have a saline abortion at a hospital. I was dropped off at the hospital. I was injected with a very long needle, and a saline solution was injected into my body, the solution that would burn my baby's body and kill him. I went through labor and delivery by myself and until I gave birth to my dead baby. I later found out it was a baby boy. My life spiraled into a life of self-destruction, depression, alcohol, drugs, promiscuity. I hated myself. I hated what I had become. My self-esteem was so low that I thought I didn't deserve a better life. I had 3 more abortions. Abortion became a form of birth control. After all, it was only a blob of tissue, or so they told me. I was never counseled. I was never given another option. I wasn't told about the baby's development. I suffered years of pain and regret, guilt, shame, until the love of Jesus Christ saved me and healed me and brought restoration in my life. And I have to speak and tell the truth that abortion hurts women. Abortion kills a human life. Abortion has devastating psychological consequences on women, just as it did on me. And it is time for the truth to be heard about abortion. It is time to protect infant life. It's time to empower women. With the safe haven laws, now a woman can relinquish her child, and she doesn't have to go through the pain and the suffering of abortion. Our nation is suffering because of abortion. It's been 48 years, I believe, of suffering, women suffering with sometimes with this pain hidden inside of us for many years. It is time for our nation to heal. It's time for women to be healed. It's time to empower women, and it's time to save babies in the womb and outside the womb. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all, Cecilia and Melissa, who had to go to another commitment, and Alan. Does anyone have any questions at this particular point for us before we conclude? We want to thank our online audience and the media outlets who have been covering this and who will also be picking it up later and tomorrow. This will get wide distribution, and to all the participants, we'll make the relevant links available so that you can have it and share it. So thank you very much, brothers and sisters, for coming to the National Press Club here this morning for this event, which really kicks off 2 days of activity, intense activity, national activity, not only here in Washington, by the way, but I should point out that as Alan said, it's a National Day of Repentance. People are taking part in this in cities, towns, and villages across our nation, in their churches, at prayer rallies being held at state capitals, at abortion mills. There is a wide range of activity taking place all around the country these next couple of days, and for very good reason, as we've outlined here today. So thank you all. God bless you, and let's move onward to victory.